four initiatives, most important was A-Space, which was, at that time, Facebook was just launching. MySpace was the dominant social network. So we cheated a little and stole the MySpace and called it A-Space. And it was to create for all analysts and analysts only a Facebook or a MySpace environment where they could collaborate freely amongst agencies and not have the constraints that their individual agencies would have on them in sharing data.
The setup for this team is a number of us were subcontractors to another company that was owned by Teresa Smetzer. So she actually was the one that kind of brought all the talent together.
Creating a space, Facebook for spies, if you will, where you could both identify the collective group of people that had some expertise that was relevant, and then collaborate with them and explore ideas and brainstorm and get different points of view and perspective before you ever write down the first sentence. I mean, that was pretty powerful. And that was part of the cultural transformation that really was so meaningful, even though people didn't like the arc.
Nicole Gibson. I was a manager at PricewaterhouseCoopers. We had resources that really understood user experience. We had people that understood performance management. We had people that understood transformation, strategic communications. Then we had that combined with the folks that were really the technical experts. Some of the solutions that we were looking at, Facebook was so new at the time. It's funny to say that so many years later. But it was like revolutionary, right? And it's like, how, if people are like loving this on the outside, how do we take this amazing application and apply it to a national security problem and mission set? How do we get people to use it to better collaborate? As that was one of the kind of the findings from the 9/11 study of the lack of communication, the silos that were put up. And so what a tremendous opportunity to leverage technology that's being used on the outside and leverage that for the inside. So a lot of technologists that had expertise with really rolling that out, but fascinating because it had never been done before in the IC, and we all know there's challenges associated with that, with getting things on the network and things like that. But working through all that was super exciting, and all these different perspectives came together to really enable both the implementation of the technology, but then the adoption and then the measurement of the success associated with that.
General Jim Clapper.
I think you've heard about developing A-Space, which I think is a major improvement in the analyst's ability to collaborate with a wide and diverse group in a controlled environment. Development of Alien, an application allowing one query to return all relevant information on the network. Now, that sounds like a really simple thing, something you're used to doing. You're sitting home doing the internet. Well, that's a huge deal for us in Intel. And a lot of this, I think, stems from the secret environment we've always existed in, where there was a premium placed on compartmentation, segmentation of information, where there wasn't a lot of information to be had. And what little we had, we wanted to protect it. And now, of course, we're inundated with information. Very different paradigm.
Louis Shepard, Chief of Requirements and Research at the Defense Intelligence Agency. My budget person, our budget lead was a wonderful woman that you may have heard of named Janice Glover-Jones. Janice later became the CIO at DIA. But in her budget days, she was always, among other things, she was telling me, try to anticipate. Don't just hand wave at palm thinking and anticipate what needs are going to be. And I was saying, look, we're inventing stuff. We don't know what we're going to need in a year. And she said, you got to think better, think harder. So, give it a stab. So we needed to come up with a program name for everything we were doing. And I can remember I had for some reason I had a deadline. We were going to announce it, some GDIP plan or something. Something had to be filed. So I needed what the name was going to be. I was sitting there in my office. I had, so what was going to be the big ball of wax name for everything we were doing for essentially analytic transformation kind of writ large? Our offices, the R-squared offices, were adjacent to the FOIA office at DIA, up on the 4th floor of the DIAC, the old building. And I remember a conversation with the FOIA guys. We got together with them, asking them, is there anything technologically we can do to help your work? And I think we helped them a little bit. But I asked them, as the kind of novice in intelligence, hey, what kind of queries do you get? You must get a bunch of loony conspiracy theorists. And they said, oh, you have no idea. Yes. The largest volume of queries we get historically at DIA for information from our files. What do you have on this? He said, if I recall right, he said the second largest volume. I said you get like, he said the second largest volume is the JFK assassination. I said, why is that? And he said, well, Oswald spent a period of time at Atsugi Naval Base, which was a big SIGINT collection center, and there's always been a lot of, that plus CIA plus, DIA was a nascent organization at the time, but we get a huge volume about that. Was he in naval intelligence, whatever. What's the biggest? About the aliens. What's your information on the aliens? When are the aliens coming? What have you been doing with the aliens? The UFOs and everything, and do you have the dead alien bodies there and the whole shebang? Well, I don't mean to disappoint the listeners, but these were always negative responses. But that had been in my mind. I was sitting there with this deadline looming. What are we going to call this program? And the program, it's all source. One of the things we like to remind people of at DIA was the Defense Intelligence Agency is actually the only all-source intelligence agency. I don't know if people really appreciate that, but we were authorized and required by charter to do everything from OSINT, MASINT. MASINT was a hallmark of DIA. SIGINT, collections, different kinds of exploitation, lots of different, every int you can name. All source. The chief of staff to the director of DIA, Louis Andre, at the time, Louis Andre had a business card. On the reverse side of his business card, it said, all source agency, all. And under it had the dictionary definition of all. The totality, the full sum, excluding nothing. Which was just, that's all source, man. That's hardcore. Sitting there staring at my wall and thinking, okay, this is an all source intelligence. Wait a second. All source intelligence. I can kind of sideways construct an acronym for the all source intelligence environment. Okay, it's called ALIEN.
Now you will hear comments from a member of the intelligence community who wish to remain anonymous. We have digitally altered this contributor's voice and edited some of their comments to respect their wishes.
Let's talk about A-Space. A-Space being an initiative that got started by the DNI to create this community of analysts and so forth. How did you feel about the creation of that program? Do you think it was a good idea?
Initially, no. I loved Interlink. I had heard about A-Space. Interlink was clearly in the lead for cutting-edge information sharing software. I mean, it wasn't even close. Now, the DNI wanted to put up this proprietary collaboration software. Why? And I wasn't a purist for open source software, but most of the Interlink suite was open source, right? Why do we need social business software running that does document management? I mean, it had a couple bells. It was pretty good at making these little web-based widgets, like as an RSS reader, and it would do tag clouds that were kind of cool. But Interlink had an RSS function in Intellipedia. I mean, it It wasn't as sophisticated, but it was fine. I was just very skeptical of why are we going to fragment this community? Why would we do that?
Don Burke, Intellipedia doyen. By the way, I just also want to say, for the record, that Mike Wertheimer is a huge friend. He was a mentor. Actually, still is. I still am in touch with him. So, he would. That was his baby. So I, Mike, if you're listening, I'm sorry. We were all on the same team trying to do things together, and I don't think we were ever really outright. I don't think there was any outright hostility. We all tried to help each other succeed as we could. I wished Mike and his gang could have come more along with trying to use Intellipedia as the core. I think that was likely a missed opportunity. But Mike and team were part of they got money, and therefore they had to have a branded thing, and they had to have their logo on things just because that's the way bureaucracies work. And so it was probably not politically possible, even if they wanted to use Intellipedia, it probably was not politically possible to just say we're going to give the money to the Intellink folks to make Intellipedia do the things it can't do that we need it to do. I don't know. That'd be an interesting question to ask him.
Jesse Wilson, intelligence analyst at DIA. I don't think A-Space was as popular maybe as Intellipedia. I could be wrong about that. It was kind of more isolated groups that would use it. But over time, a lot of people would use. Maybe they wouldn't contribute, but they were certainly going there to check, different communities that would form on issues that they were that particular analyst was responsible for. They would go there and be able to use that as a resource. Sometimes you'd use it too, just figuring out additional people that were working your same portfolio issues that you may not know about, and figuring out who they were. Or at the time, a lot of times when you read a product at an agency, it wouldn't identify who the analyst was, and that did change over time. But back then, at the beginning, it didn't. And so A-Space was a great way to go. You could find that product, and typically the analyst who wrote it, might have been proud of it, and uploaded it there, and you could see who the analysts were and reach out to them.
Nicole Gibson again.
We definitely didn't know if it was going to work. And I definitely remember talking to you, Brian, about how do we change the hearts and minds of the managers? So managers being the government managers. So in the example I just gave, it was a lot of junior folks who were in there that were very comfortable with Facebook on the outside. We're like, this is amazing that we get to use leading technology from industry and apply it to an Intel problem. But it violated, and I'm using air quotes when I say violated, the analytical tradecraft and how people had kind of grown up in the community with producing reports. And so there was this tension that was, again, fascinating as someone in my, early 30s at this point, where late 20s, early 30s, where you're seeing this new generation who's like, look at what we can do. We have these tools at our disposal. We want to collaborate. We want to work together. We've been inspired or really just touched by what the events of 9/11 want to make a difference with the culture of folks more senior in their careers of, that's not how we did it. I'm sorry. That's great that you guys figured something out in 10 minutes, but really you need to go through your manager, then your manager's manager, and this whole chain for validating. So, it was a really interesting discussion of how do we make sure that people aren't skipping necessary steps in terms of making sure what they're suggesting or recommending or the analysis that they're doing is relevant or accurate with, hey, I know that was the way we did things, 15, 20 years. I recognize and respect that was how we did tradecraft or how tradecraft worked. That's not what we need for going forward in this community. So it really was a fascinating time. How do you, change those hearts and minds? That was a challenge. I know you and I worked on that together.
Michael Wertheimer, Assistant Deputy Director and Chief Technology Officer for Analysis at the Office of the DNI. At that time, so we're talking in the roughly between 2005 and 2009. The Office of the DNI lived on CIA's network, which was Lotus Notes based, and they had a social networking site where you could post stuff. It was the old style UUNet and kind of not UUNet. I forgot the posting thing. It was
the bulletin board.
Bulletin board. Thank you. That's really what I was struggling for. And they were debating this A-Space thing on there, and some guy from, so I could see it because I'm on the network. And some guy called me out by name and said, he guaranteed I will get somebody's throat cut because of A-Space. I'll never forget that. It's important for me to remember that. I didn't take it other than just a misplaced concept where what I was trying to say is you're exposing too much, and our sources and methods I don't get. So I'm being loose with that. I'll never forget that.
I'm Becca McGregor, formerly Becca Thompson, and I was a consultant for Analytic Transformation. There was no central repository of contacts either of this is who you turn to on this intelligence topic. This is the expert at this agency on X, Y, and Z. You had to just know who to call. And that was designed for, probably very good counterintelligence reasons that there was no central repository. But we needed some way to get people to connect and build community and share information, especially if they were all looking at the same topics or targets. So it was largely focused on human networking, on JWICs at the top secret level, and conversation. I mean, from a practical use perspective, someone could post something in A-Space, and then someone could take it out and use it, or share it with somebody else. That it gave people an incentive to digest the information in A-Space because they knew it was usable. But I would say it was also probably a disincentive for posting information into A-Space because they knew that they lost control of it, right, once they put it inside. And I feel like that was a user behavior that maybe some were resistant to at the time.
Now we hear again from Michael Wertheimer.
We wanted to keep the collectors out, not because we were wanting to be exclusive, but we wanted the free exchange of specially handled information to be free to the analysts. That is, certain caveats that maybe they were not allowed to get because this agency controlled that information. But within A-Space, there was a waiver. Even our allies provided waivers so that the analysts were on equal footing and they could pretty much see all the intelligence. Now, they couldn't report it out necessarily without permission, but within the safe zone of A-Space, they could largely see whatever they wanted.
Don Burke again.
In my book, A-Space was a walled garden aimed at trying to make analysts feel comfortable contributing to a space that was just for them.
Mm-hmm.
And so, it had some features of a collaborative space, but it also had a lot of features that, in my view, were kind of throwbacks to other worlds of sort of closed little, even if it was one platform, there were all these closed little spaces within it, and everyone had to be invited in to that, this or that. So you could have 20 spaces essentially on the same topic, all doing their own little thing, not knowing what any of them other ones are doing. But it was a big effort again to try to get analysts to think like a community.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, that's my blunt and not so great observation.
Sean Waltman, Google's global head of cloud geography.
So I think the common criticism of that movement was, hey, you're poking us in the eye, but you're not giving us an opportunity to fix it. Did you feel that criticism was fair?
To an extent, I would say. Can we talk about A-Space?
We are going to talk about A-Space. We can talk about it at any point in time.
So I feel like I feel like the whole A-Space thing, it reminds me, if you've ever seen the Simpsons episode where Homer finds his long-lost brother and he owns the auto manufacturer, and like Homer has all these ideas about what he wants to put into it, and it ends up just this monstrosity. And I feel like the same could be said for A-Space, where it started out with like, no, I see what they're doing over here. We need to put our decades of rigor around this like kind of free movement, and it has to have all this row label, classification, and it has to have all this like this additional stuff. And all of a sudden, it starts to look like a lot less like what we were trying to do, and a lot more like the traditional programs of record. And the intent, I felt, was in the right place. I just feel like it grew into this monstrosity, and the execution was really off. But I was on my way out at that point. Like I sort of never got to see just exactly how it went. Maybe it was a tremendous success, but that is what I saw like happening. It was like that pull to try to balance the two worlds ultimately ended up just squashing like the Intel Link, free and open movement, and bringing it back more into a collaborative version of the old world.
Joan McIntyre, Program Manager for Analytical Collaboration. To get something quickly, we ended up with a pre-designed platform that had its own limitations. And that was kind of its success and failure. We got something up and it got used, and it partially served the purpose that we were looking for, is to provide the space for analysts to get together. And there were certainly, I know we had even very, very early examples of people connecting the dots because they were able to share information within a space. But in terms of getting that to the next step of, a space was going to be this, it was going to be a data set, information access capabilities that all analysts would have access to the same information, and that they could kind of easily share among themselves the information, the data, the information, the reporting, and be able to talk to it and kind of put things together collectively.
Now we hear again from Lewis Shepard.
And particularly for DIA, where we had this mindset of, okay, we run JWICs, and we secure and certified JWICs services. So we should treat people who enter into JWICs, we should treat them in a kind of common slipstreamed way. It's funny that you bring this up, because now that I think about it, this is probably the origins of the roots of zero trust thinking. So zero trust thinking has bought a lot of purchase in DoD and IC thinking, with a lot of support from NSA originally. So I think thinking about that, about having massive walled gardens and allowing people in and having the ability to operate within that walled garden without, with differential treatment of trust across multiple services. That's led to, I think, a lot of hard and change thinking over the last couple of decades.
Becca McGregor again.
It was so fun. I loved it, to go out and really talk to users, even the ones who said that we were going to, damage national security significantly. That was helpful to be like, why are, okay, so there's fear here. There's fear, there's concern. We need policies. We need policies to back this up. And that's when I think the organization became more involved in, the ICDs and the policies around information sharing, to say this is sanctioned too. There's a framework for how we're supposed to share information. It's not just get on this social networking site and, spew your guts, whatever you're working on. Here's a framework for how you can safely and securely share information. There's technology behind this to make sure that, things are tracked and this system is secure, and we understand what's happening and who's sharing information. So there was a lot of going out there, listening to users' concerns, listening to their fears, listening to their frustrations, and then bringing them back, and all of us trying to figure out how we can continue to build an environment where there is responsible, effective, and secure information sharing that follows every policy already in existence, that provides more frameworks and policies to help guide people in a supportive way, not in a drown you in policy ways, but here's how you should share information. And then also make sure that it was fitting into the cultures of all these different agencies, that it worked into their existing analytic apparatus, that this was a supportive tool, not an additive tool, that it worked within their analytic workflow and it was helping them. Because I think at the end of the day, that's the goal, is to produce valuable, meaningful, timely, relevant analysis based on the best available sources to the U.S. government. And, making sure we were staying on top of the outcomes, that we could go out there and talk to people and be like, did this actually help you at the end of the day? Is this actually helping you solve your hard intelligence challenges and produce better analysis?
Lewis again.
The learning curve was steep because I had to learn about intelligence. This was my first real enterprise role. I'd been in and around startups plenty. I had to learn about bureaucratic behavior on the ground. I'd been a political science undergrad and political science PhD student at Stanford, and I learned a lot about the theory of bureaucratic behavior and organizational behavior in the public sector. But there's no learning like you get inside the beast. But most particularly, I learned about what people who worked for my agency but didn't work for my division did. And that means I began to do what most people in our IT side had not been doing. I started hanging out with analysts. I started going over, DIA, we had office kind of almost barriers, boundaries between. Nobody went over and hung out with the analysts. Well, hey, I was a political scientist. I started life as a Soviet studies guy. I, took Russian and immediately wondered, hey, what are my Russian colleagues doing over? And it wasn't, immediately apparent that it might be helpful in the fight against Al Qaeda, but it turns out it was. But we had multiple new analytic demands on our systems that we had never prepared for. And so I had to, think in the way that an analyst would. Many of them were like me, poli-sci and international relations trained. Many of them were area specialists, which I had been. Many of them thought that way. So it kind of helped me to recall that part of my brain and think like an analyst and talk with analysts. I think they appreciated that. Many of them I know did and became good friends. But, organizationally, I think it also helped us.
Dr. Wertheimer again.
I think A-Space went to the DIA, which was a great move because DIA wanted to assert a role in the big IC, not just a DoD role. They really wanted to play. And to have A-Space gave them great credibility. And I think DIA, NSA was great technically, but they were a collection agency. They really knew how to do collection. They built databases for large volumes of collection, but they didn't know how to do reporting database. That wasn't how, they used to search raw intelligence. They don't know how to search reporting. So to go to an agency that's a little better at reporting, that really understood writing reporting, all source reporting, that kind of thing, DIA was the perfect choice to put A-Space and now I-Space.
Becca McGregor.
Well, and there was accountability, right? So if we saw something that was, or if you saw something inappropriate, you knew who posted it.
Yep.
You knew you could take it down.
Yep.
You knew you could contract a supervisor.
Yes, exactly. I was just saying, I could find their boss. We could take it down. Yep.
And you said this before, but I'll say it a little bit more. It is a little stunning that there was no way to discover that chain of command.
Yeah.
So if someone stepped out of the box at a conference,
right,
but I knew their name, I knew their agency, so
yeah,
you can't find them.
No way to find them. No email directory, no phone directory, no way to find them ever again.
So A-Space was creating a way not only to identify folks that were putting up content, experts and things like that, is also linking together like, this is where they work,
Yep.
here's what their command chain is, because he had to.
Yep.
For accountability.
It was wild that it didn't exist before.
It's something else, isn't it?
I'm Tom Finger. I was the Deputy Director of National Intelligence for Analysis and concurrently Chair of the National Intelligence Council. Very early on, communication that Mike brought to me from somebody in U.S. Forces Korea who had seen something posted on A-Space and contacted the folks who were put it out there. So I don't know who you are. I said, but I'm working on this problem. And here's something I think you might find helpful in there. I said, hello, that's exactly what we're trying to do here. Didn't pay any attention to what agency, getting a mother may I from a supervisor to contribute to collective understanding of an important problem. The standards that Nancy put together and we enforced in training, we enforced in evaluation of products, and helped agencies that needed the arms and legs and money to evaluate products before they published them, not wait until somebody said you did a bad job. Make it better before you put it out there. Hey, I know that the people in the other agency been trained the way I was. They're held to the same standards, and their own review processes are like our review processes. Here, I can actually trust what they do. That means I can, let's say, you track that dimension of the problem, and I'll track this, and we'll put it together. So the kind of things in here that were to facilitate collaboration, and I think they were all useful.
Robert Cardillo has an important place in the history of A-Space. He was always taking risks and trying new things. I think that's what made me look up to him. Anyway, after Tom Finger left and after some reorganizations, Robert took over managing the President's Daily Briefing. We call it the PDB. He created this walk-on process that was managed in A-Space. Now, typically the PDB is a very, very tightly controlled product. There's a nomination process, a review of the nomination, and if the nomination is deemed good enough, you are permitted to write for the president on that topic. That was just the nomination process. And this was all run by the CIA. After the stand-up of the DNI, they ran it, but the CIA really ran it and still does to this very day. Anyway, Robert did something really clever. He knew that the PDB needed to be disrupted and that different voices in the IC needed to be heard. So he created this PDB walk-on process inside of A-Space. He sent out an email to that entire analytic workforce and said that he wanted articles that were outside of the book. He wanted something in his back pocket to use if the president ever said, "What else do you got?" So then he started collecting all these products from INR, DIA, NSA, NGA, FBI, and on and on. It really diversified the book and let the president know that there was more to the IC than just the CIA. He ran that walk-on process through A-Space, which was kind of regulated by Cardillo and Cardillo's staff. If you had a good idea, it can float up, and then we'll take it and put it into one of the most prestigious things that there is. That was pretty cool.
Dr. Wertheimer again.
If you don't mind, I'll give you an example that was a lot of fun. There was some posters put up, you may remember this story, of what looked like a generic terrorist. I don't know how to describe a generic terrorist other than it was put up around Boston. And FBI found it, and there was a big alert put up. Who is this? Is there a terrorist coming to town? Why were these things put around? And all these people said, well, this is so-and-so. They posted it to our A-Space platform. And the analysts who study terrorism, this is so-and-so. Well, but that so-and-so has never been seen wearing glasses before. Well, he's trying to fool us. And they were anchored in what they knew and tried to take something different and shape it and twist it into something they knew. I remember one guy saying, I'll bet a paycheck it's this guy. And there was some guy who was completely outside of that, didn't do counterterrorism. But he knew how to do an image search on Google. So he asked the FBI, can I get this on my low side? And he said, yeah, let me send it to you. And he found an image search, and boom, it turned out to be a performative artist. It was totally benign, and he was just doing it as part of his art project. But because the powers that be, the real analysts, only lived on classified networks, they didn't see value in unclassified, they took it to a place they knew. They bended what they saw to their prior biases. Whereas you took someone who had no bias whatsoever and said, I know a way to look for this, as if I had no bias, and boom, he solved it. There were many examples of that. It was really, really fabulous to see non-experts stump the experts on something that lived in the seam between something the experts had seen in the past, but something that looked much more internet savvy, something that was meant to deflect, for which people who just live on the internet at home and it could bring to bear. And that's what we were trying to accomplish. This wisdom of the crowds is so much better on new ideas and new ways of thinking, and A-Space was meant to do that.
I remember at the point we were briefing President Bush, we had success stories, was the other thing. We had real success stories.
Becca McGregor again.
The ones that I'm like too scared to.
That's okay.
But we had real success stories by 2008. A year into months maybe into the launch, we had real success stories, which was amazing.
So towards the end of his administration, I think he left in 2008, was it? Yeah. So he made a bit of a tour around the IC, and he came to DNI headquarters. And I was so happy that Tom kind of squeezed in. So let's do a live demo of A-Space. Well, I didn't know what to make of it, but I had met President Bush once before. I had briefed no other president, but I had met all the secretaries over the course of my NSA career, Rumsfeld and Condi Rice, and I had met them all, and generally never had a bad experience. But I think President Bush, when he came to NSA after 9/11, and I got to meet him that first time, I was so impressed how he shook everyone's hand and how he gave a speech where he stood up and said to the NSA workforces right after 9/11, he said, this is on me. This isn't on you. It wasn't your failure. This is on me. I need you to get back to work, and I need you to solve this problem and get me the intel, and I'll act on it. I mean, just so gracious. I couldn't believe it. So when he was coming to ODNI, I was very excited because I knew he was a very gracious host, a very gracious man, and he saw the value in the workforce, meeting them and encouraging them. I can't overstate that. So I jumped at the chance, and we put together some live demos. And I said, we had A-Space up on the wall. He comes in. I said, Mr. President, you've probably heard of, MySpace and Facebook. I said, we built that inside. And analysts from the entire community can log in, post their information just like anybody else, and they can discuss problems. So I showed him a couple of the picture this, and I showed him a couple of things where people solved a problem that they wouldn't have solved any other way but on this platform. And one of the things, I was able to bring one person, and I bought Rebecca McGregor, who had been really, really good. And we had a poster that we had blown up from Time magazine that had named us in the top 100 inventions of the year. And we gave him a Sharpie, and we had him sign it right then and there and take a picture with me. And then he took a picture with Rebecca. And it was such a wonderful day because the president completely got what we were saying. It wasn't your typical over the head, trying to impress him. It was, we're looking like the best of what the outside is, what he read about, what he understood, and we're trying our darndest to be the best of what we can learn and make it better. And it was a great day. It was a great, great day for us.
I don't know how long it was between hearing the president was coming and finding out I was going. I think I was asked to go because I was the most effective at using the computer mouse, I think. And I had done so many demos for Dr. Wertheimer and others, like as the person sitting over in the corner of the computer, just like flipping through the pages, knowing where we were going next, looking things up, having my tabs ready. My digital native skills came in handy. So Dr. Wertheimer, of course, gave the real presentation on A-Space. And I was there to drive the demo, but I was in the room. Again, I think I was 22 at this point. No, this is December 2008, probably. So I guess I was 23. I aged so much on this project. I was a seasoned veteran at age 23. Had been flying around the world, doing my demo thing, and was ready for the big show of a presidential briefing. And then the most harrowing and memorable part of this presentation was at the very end when, President Bush thanked everybody for being there and walked around the room and shook their hand. And he talks to Dr. Wertheimer, and Dr. Wertheimer says, "I'd like to introduce Rebecca Thompson. She's the brains behind A-Space." And the president says, "Is that true?" And I said, "Yes, sir." And as everyone knows, that is not true. I was not the brains behind A-Space, So we walk out of the room, and Dr. Wertheimer was like, "Wow, that was great." And I was like, "Oh my God, I think I just lied to the president." He's like, "It's fine."
So I'm going to ask you this question. It's very specific and very tactical, but I've heard the story in different ways, and I want to get your view of it.
Richard Immerman.
So this was probably 2008. It was the last year of the Bush presidency, and he came to Liberty Crossing to get a briefing on analytic transformation. So it included an A-Space briefing, some other things, but it also included the AIS standards. And what I think Tom told me was that you couldn't go for some
Yeah, I
reason?
was not there. I don't know why I was not there. Because Tom loved to parade us around and always would have me there. I don't know why I wasn't there. I mean, I can't. It's hard to believe that I would have said I'm busy. But I don't remember why I wasn't there.
Tom Fingar again.
It is astounding because when the DNI was formed, 2005, really didn't stand up until 6. This pamphlet that we have here in front of us is dated the 8th, 2008.
Right.
In really 2 years of time, 13 programs off the ground, and you're briefing the president on 2 of them, Analytic Integrity and Standards and A-Space. So can you bring us into that? How did that come to you, and what was that experience like?
Well, if I remember correct, I didn't know I was briefing the president on those things. That it was toward the end of the president's tenure, also my expected tenure. And I guess it was in NCTC space, maybe, that we were there. And McConnell caught me by surprise. He began a conversation by saying, Mr. President, we were created after 9/11 and the Iraq WMD, said, "We failed you. We failed you then." And this whole effort has been to make sure we don't fail you again. And Tom's now going to tell you why that's not going to happen. That that was my forewarning. It was kind of over to you, Tom, on it. But all of the years in the State Department where everybody's got their elevator speech, the capacity to, in a few minutes, what are the most important. And I knew both of the topics, so that's why I picked those elements of the all that we did. And in part, on the fly, I judged he'd get it. I mean, he'd understand what there was nothing esoteric about this. And for a business school graduate, the logic of it would be clear. All of that was very, very quick. The more important is I knew this stuff. I knew it cold in there. And I began by saying that my top priority when we started this was to restore confidence in the work that we do. Your confidence, senior leaders in the government, that if you didn't have confidence in us and in what we did, we're useless. And very gratified, but he interrupted me. He said, "You did. You did. And great job," some words to that effect. And so then I described things that we did to ensure quality. That segued into things that we did to build collaboration, to get more synergy out of the community, which was the ARC was the way. So that's how it came about. It wasn't let's have a meeting and decide what talking points we're going to use with this meeting for the president. McConnell caught me entirely off guard.
You have been listening to the podcast series From Tragedy to Transformation, Intelligence Reform After 9/11, sponsored by the Unredacted Podcast. The interviews you heard were conducted by me, Brian Drake. We would like to thank our many contributors to this series: Don Burke, Sean Dennehy, Margaret Dillard, Tom Fingar, Jeff Fowler, Nicole Gibson, Richard Immerman, John Keefe, Mark Lowenthal, Rebecca McGregor, Joan McIntyre, Carmen Medina, Louis Shepard, Teresa Smetzer, Mike Wertheimer, Sean Woltman, and Jesse Wilson. From Tragedy to Transformation was produced by Lindy Kaiser and Brian Drake, with support from Sean Dennehy, Jim Clapper, and Chris Rasmussen. If you have any questions or comments about this series, please reach out to us at questions@unredactedpodcast.com. And thank you.